Hi, this is Dr. Joseph Baker from the Limerick Chiropractic Center, and I want to welcome you tonight to our conversation about stress. In fact, we're going to talk about a different type of stress tonight, and we're going to talk about it regarding the surface EMG. Now, many people that I have that come into our office here at the Limerick Chiropractic Center, it's one of their biggest complaints is stress and how stress affects their body. And here's the thing, I think in the end, as so many people talk about stress, we oftentimes can't even identify, what is stress? Well, we're going to do that first tonight. We're going to talk about stress. We're going to talk about how we can measure it. We're going to talk about, some of the things that you're able to do in order to help yourself free yourself from some of those stresses so that in the end, you're able to live that more vital life. Now, I got a question. And I want you to pause for just a moment before we continue with this conversation. And I want you to think about just knowing that we're going to talk about measuring stress levels. I want you to think about, who do you know? Who do you know that doesn't know about how their body is functioning, about how stress is affecting them, about the bigness of what it does inside of their particular system? Who do you know? In fact, if you're a patient at the Limerick Chiropractic Center, I want you to stop now. I want you to hit the like button. It's part of our responsibility to make sure that we demonstrate that we're seeing this video. The second part of it is to make sure that as we walk through this process, hey, listen, you leave me that comment so that I better understand what you're learning, what you're taking away from this conversation. And this way we can continue to talk about some of those things that you've learned, some of the concerns that you have, maybe the questions that this stirs up inside of your mind. And then the third thing is to share this information. In the next 20 minutes, we're going to share a lot of information about stress. We're going to talk about things that most people have no idea about. And quite honestly, we all have friends, we all have neighbors and coworkers that need to hear this information. But the only way that they get this information is if we're willing to actually share what we know. And fortunately, it is so easy, it is so simple to just simply click that share button in order to make sure that we have that opportunity of helping others. One simple thing. Now, I told you we were going to define stress, so let's get it on. Let's talk about this. I love this definition. I love the definition of the fact that it's a force that's exerted on our body. Now, here's the thing. There's all different types of forces. This doesn't tell us what type of stress you have. It just tells us what stress is. It pushes, it pulls, it's pressure against us. That's just one definition. It doesn't describe the type, though. Is it mechanical stress? Is it something physical? Listen, or is it stressful work? You picking things up and putting things down? Is it the mental stress of, worrying about, making ends meet? Is it the emotional stress of, watching somebody go through the process of an illness or a disease process? Is it chemical stresses? Being exposed to, tobaccos and alcohols and different foods that are not good for our bodies. There are numerous types of stresses. In fact, the one stress that oftentimes is always missed. Every time we talk about stress, it's always missed. And that's gravity. We wonder why the body constantly worsens over time when we're not maintaining. Well, it's because of gravity. It's that mechanical stress that's constantly pushing down on us to keep our feet firmly on this ground. And yet, if we don't have the proper alignment in our spine, if we're not maintaining our spine using those better choices, well then guess what? Gravity is always going to make it worse. It's always going to cause it to want to break down even more. And this is where I have to say, stress does kill. This isn't a chiropractic thing. You don't have to look into chiropractic journals. You can look in numerous journals. Go ahead and just Google it, and you're going to find out how stress destroys the body. Whether we're talking about producing cancers or tumors or heart, it continues to destroy the body because of the gateway that it gets to use. It's like, wow, what gateway? Well, unfortunately, when we talk about mental, emotional stresses, mechanical stresses coming from subluxations, it's because it affects the master system of your body, your brain and your spinal cord. That nervous system of yours is that master system of the body. It conveys information to absolutely every other tissue, organ, system of the body. And the difficulty is because, just like a computer, if you infect the CPU, if you infect that, that core of it, it's going to end up reaching out to everything else that's connected to it and just simply, like a virus, causing it not to work the way it's supposed to. Now, like I said, this is not a chiropractic thing. This is embryology 101. And if you've never listened to any of our other workshops, well then, let me just review this quickly for you. Your brain was the very first thing inside your body to form. It's the gray matter of the brain and the spinal cord, called the notochord, that were the very first things to form. And from there, as Gray's Anatomy describes it, every system and organ and tissue in the body were commanded to form because of your nervous system. And these charts up here, these are just diagrams. They're diagrams of what we know from Gray's Anatomy, what we've learned over the centuries. And the anatomy of our body hasn't changed. Our understanding of it might have changed over time, but what we know to be true hasn't changed. And here's the thing, when we think that, stress can't affect different organs, well, let me tell you, because the gray matter of your brain, because the spinal column controls things like your heart, your lungs, your liver, the muscles in your back, every tissue and organ in our body can be affected because of it. And I love the fact that, we have different charts, like the Merrick chart that showed up in the 39th edition of the 29th edition of Gray's Anatomy. This is something that we don't argue with. We recognize to be truth. That when we have stress, it's able to affect all different areas. Find those weak links and just exploit them. Now, some of you out there are saying, oh, absolutely, I know this to be true. When we think, when the weather changes, I feel it in my joints. When the weather changes, I get a headache because of how it affects the joints. Some of you come in contact with, different smells. You walk into a room that there's a fragrance or there's a smell, and immediately it produces the headache. Sometimes it's the physical contact. You just have to come in contact with something like, let me think, like a peanut. And if you have an allergy, it produces that stress inside your system that creates a histamine reaction, and that quickly can produce an anaphylactic reaction. I don't know. You think that might be a stress? I would say absolutely yes. Now, inside your spine, when we have the lack of a proper curve, when we don't have that proper alignment the way it's supposed to be, the problem is that creates stress inside of our nervous system. And as a chiropractor, this is just part of the body that we address those type of stresses. If you're new to chiropractic and maybe you've never been under chiropractic care before and you're watching this information for the first time, as a chiropractor, my job is very simple. It's to find what are called vertebral subluxations, bones that are out of place, that are putting pressure on the nerve, that don't allow the brain to communicate the way it's supposed to. So whatever is connected to the other end just can't work as well as it's intended. Here's the thing. I don't create anything. We don't add anything to the body. We don't remove anything other than these subluxations. Because your body, just like mine, has everything it already needs in order to function at 100%. We just have to get out of our own way. Now, This surface EMG test, well, this is how we measure the stress inside of our body. In fact, for many of you, if you're a patient here at the Limmer Chiropractic Center, you've heard me describe it in a way that is a little bit different. It tells me how hard your body's working in order to maintain your posture. Because when you have that sick posture, when you don't have that proper alignment, yes, the muscles have to stress more, they have to work harder, they have to do things that they're not designed to do in order to actually be able to keep you in this upright position. That nerve irritation, that's a level of stress. So let's quickly take a look at this, all right? Now, I love this technology. I think it's great. We've been using it in our office probably for about 20 plus years. And in turn, you know, to me, it's just information. It gives us that picture into how the body is functioning. And I'm a very much a see it person. I mean, I love learning, but when I get to see things, I get to wrap my head around it even more quickly. So, like you notice over here, okay, on this side, you're going to see this model. And in fact, you see those green lines coming out from the side. This is the ideal looking surface EMG scan. This is what we want to see. When everything is connecting properly, when everything's communicating the way it's supposed to, the muscles are going to be firing in a very balanced manner. Now let's take a look at this other picture. Now, forgive me, I'm going to simplify this. But I don't think that there's any medical test or any test in general that uses red to tell you that there is a good outcome there. All right? Now, maybe if you notice, if you know one, you could point that out to me. All right? But let me tell you, red is never good. In fact, pink is a little bit better, but not exactly normal. And that's exactly how this test measures things. It uses green as normal, pink as one standard deviation above normal, or in other words, it's working harder, and then red. Red is when your body's out of control. It's got a lot of stress. But in the end, the one thing that we're going to focus on is this number here at the bottom. It gives us this numeric value of how your body is performing. Now, I'm going to tell you, this number, 193, is relatively normal for people who start under chiropractic care. There's numerous individuals that we've seen much, much higher because, like anything, they've waited far too long in order to get help. And in fact, you know, we've had patients who've walked in and they've been up in the thousands because their body is in such bad crisis, it's stressed so hard, and in fact, it's out of control. Now, the sad thing is that they've waited far too long. They never should have waited to that point. They should have listened when their body was talking to them so they didn't have to deal with that crisis. But the machine and this device tell us very simply how the body is functioning. In fact, I love this. I love the before and the after. You know, it's something that we do all the time where we see that ideal, which is the green all the way on this side. We see the individual who had the scan, and at 363 before their treatment, you know, their body is out of control. It's working a lot harder than it's supposed to. As we look at what's on the far side at 119, well, guess what? Their body, although not perfect, not totally balanced, is working much, much better. And that's the goal. We realize we don't live in a perfect world. But in the same respect, our body, if it demonstrates its ability to heal, is capable of improving upon how it functions. And I love this test from the standpoint that it tells us how the body is functioning. In fact, we use this very special form of surface EMG, which happens to be called a Dynarum. So this marries not only measuring the muscles and how they're firing, but we do that in motion. And this is something that we use for different cases here in the office. Certainly when we've had an auto accident or different types of injuries, instability injuries. But it allows us that opportunity of understanding, well, are things working the way they're supposed to? I love when we look at a scan like this all the way on this side where the red and the blue lines they're tight together. They're right on top of each other because from right and left, things are firing the same as you're bending forward and as you're coming back. Now, unfortunately, when we see this side here, there's a separation between those lines. And in fact, they're not firing equally because of the instability that's there. See, sadly, we oftentimes only think of this when we're in pain. But the problem is that there's people walking around with this going on that they don't even know that it's happening. In fact, like anything, oftentimes we talk about, when is it the best time to get checked? Well, it's today. Not when you're in crisis, not when things are spiraling out of control, but today. Because in the end, it's that thing that's so simple, so easy, so painless, that only takes a few minutes, but gives us invaluable information about how our body is functioning. And to me, that's the key. The key is, listen, we all know somebody. We all know somebody who doesn't know what we know about the function of the body. And yet we recognize, as we look at them, that their posture is shifted. As we watch them move, they're not moving smoothly, they're not doing what they're used to do. As we listen to hear them talk, we recognize, as they have those complaints of different types of stresses, that the body is not capable of expressing itself at 100% the way it used to. What are we able to do to help them? Well, quite honestly, just simply give them the information. Because in the end, the one thing I recognize is that knowledge is power. See, ignorance is not bliss, and not knowing doesn't mean that stuff goes away. So in the end, the one thing I recognize that we can give them is the opportunity of just simply getting checked. Just simply finding out to know what's going on inside their own body. And as a chiropractic patient, if you're watching this, you know people. They've never been checked. They've never been under chiropractic care. Part of it is for them to just simply hear the information, to process it, and then to make the decision to be open to actually learning a little bit about how their body is functioning. So I'm going to remind you. As always, we do 3 things with this video. Number 1, we like it. Number 2, I want to hear your comment. What was the thing that was most profound for you as a takeaway from our conversation tonight? What was the thing that you learned that you didn't know before? Maybe it's the fact that, you know what, I know that my friend John, he needs to hear this. Let me tag him in order to make sure that he gets this information. Maybe you have a question, but leave me that comment. And number 3, share this information. Share it with your Facebook friends. Share it with your group that you hang with on social media to make sure that at least they have the opportunity of hearing this information so that if it's part of their journey, they're able to take that very next step. I'm Dr. Joseph Baker from the Limerick Chiropractic Center.